ready for us? Everyone? Yes. As our dear mentor would say back to me. Hello, everyone. It's so good to see your wonderful faces. Tonight's very exciting, and we've heard mesmerized so many times tonight that the joke isn't even funny anymore, is it? But anyway, Anton Mesmer is on for tonight. But I have a couple of announcements. Tomorrow night we have our foundations, which we are calling what, Rita?
Ernest Holmes, Now and Then.
Because what we're learning is, even with Anton or with Ernest Holmes, with anyone, if we can't use it, there's really no point in talking about it. It's great to know what everyone did hundreds of years ago. It's great to know what masters did 2,000 and more years ago. But unless we can take it and bring it into now, then it's just information, right? So tonight we have a lot of that, and we're very excited. But this week we have, tomorrow at 6:30, we have the foundations, and it's the last chance to jump in if you were thinking about it, because it is a full series. And on Friday we have our movie night, which is what? Cocoon. And what's so special about that movie is that we had it and we bought it and we couldn't play it. It doesn't play on any of the DVDs here in the United States. And we went searching and searching for it, even tried to download it. It does not work with our stuff. And I hear that there is something about that, but what was great is the miracle, the magic of it, is one of our congregants heard that on Facebook, because if you know me, I put everything on Facebook. And he saw that, and it just happened to take his kids up to a lake or wherever it was, Stone Dam, and it was closed, and he took them over to a thrift shop and said, boy, I wish I could find that. Oh, Patrick wants that Cocoon so bad to show it for. And he looked down, and there was a copy of Cocoon right there, the one that actually can be shown, that actually works. And so that's how it works, my friends. And then Sunday, yes, exactly, right? So that means even more. Then Sunday's our last Sunday of the magical month. Will always be magical, but our theme this month has been magic. And it's been so wonderful. So this week, are these? Yeah, totally. So these are our wonderful no complaint-free world that Will Bowen, he was actually in the New Thought movie documentary, and he started this, and it's the real simple thing is with this is that you keep it on here, and the moment that you have a moment that you would like to maybe criticize something or complain or gossip, nobody in this room, but if there was someone who was to do that, you switch it to the other arm, and you keep switching it back and forth, and we're just kind of playing with it here at the center, and I just want you to know that as of 6:30, I've reached day 2. I'm on day 2, and we've had it since Friday, so that's pretty good. I'm on heading into day 3. But what's good about this is that I call it the awareness bracelet, because I have learned more in the last 4 days about reframing what comes out of my mouth before we can even, it's just, I mean, to think all this time I knew and thought I was perfect. And then I put this on, and I realized that I have some things to learn, and I'm really enjoying it. And day 1, I have to say, anybody on day 1? Yeah, that's what. So day 1, let me tell you about day 1. Day 1 is a power day, because everything, in my opinion, is learned in day 1. All the awareness that I'll ever need is in day 1. It'll be great, 21, take this off, but day 1 is really the day that I see why it's such a power day. So Rita's giving me the eye. Yes. Right here at Centers for Spiritual Living, right there at the Ron's, they're giving it. Critique. Yeah. So, and the whole thing with it real easy is you put it on, and I've been having a lot of phone calls and a lot of conversations with people who are wanting to find the loophole in complaining and discussing, and there isn't one. All it is just be good to yourself. This isn't a shame thing, and you'll never know which one it's on because it just keeps going back and forth. The goal is to keep it on one hand for 21 days. There you go. So I think that's, and then next week is our Inner Child Workshop, Part 2, Part 1. It's called Reparenting the Inner You 101. So there you go. Next week, Thursday. October, we're already there. So enough about me and these and that and this and this. It's time to get on with some mesmeration. So let's mesmerize, shall we? So let me just take us into a wonderful moment that I call now. And I'm so grateful for our travelers that have come in from that wonderful, wonderful mainland. And I'm so grateful for each and every person here in these seats, and just grateful for this entire planet and the cosmos. So what I know is that right where I am, good is, God is. Call it whatever you want. It needs no name, because it is the all that is all. It is every name ever imaginable. Every name that has ever been spoken is that word of good, that word of God, and it's happening right here where I am. And the good news is that I'm not alone. It is happening everywhere. There's not a place where God is not. So what I know is that each and every one of us is that wonderful essence of love, of spirit. And so what I know about tonight is that it's already unfolded perfectly, easily, effortlessly. And I'm so grateful for Reverend Rita, who is taking us on this wonderful journey of this wonderful man, Anton Mesmer, a new thought leader, but much more than that, a mystic in his own right. So I know that spirit never dies. So Anton is right here, right now, through and as everything in this room. He's taken a seat right here at the center of where good is and where each and every one of us is. So let tonight unfold. Everything that needs to be heard will be heard and is already heard in the mind of good. And whatever needs to be said is said perfectly, easily, and effortlessly. So let's have at it. Let's go forward from this moment to the next moment, celebrating this thing called life, celebrating this man, Anton Mesmer, celebrating each and every one of us. And with gratitude in my heart, I simply let it go. Let it land in that thing called the law. Let it be, let it be, let it be, as together as one we say. And so it is. And no further ado, Reverend Rita.
I have my wand and my robes on. I have my wand and my robes. All right. So it's interesting because I studied him briefly when I was going to practitioner school, because we always study him as one of the people of the New Thought movement, and how he influenced the New Thought movement. But he always came across like, oh, this was a charlatan or a quack, or, we kind of made fun of him. But as the more research I did to present this, and I found some books on the internet, and I got them, and I went on the internet and looked, for all the different things that were said about him, and so many varied things. But what I hope tonight is that, what I know tonight is that we're going to see him in a different light. Because if we look at it, everybody that's ever did something new or tried something new, and especially in all things, like scientists, inventors and everything, they were kind of made fun of at first. And sometimes, even if you were to go on the internet and look up religious science, which we all practice, you'd probably find that people think that, we're a cult, or, we're telling people things that, are going to hurt them and stuff. So there seems, and which got me thinking, that there seems to be a resistance to change, which is really, because even the quantum physicists of today are ostracized by their medical profession. They were doctors at first, and now they've come up with something different, Bruce Lipton and Greg Braden and these people. And it's the same thing. So I saw the reoccurrence of history, just reoccurring. So I'm just knowing that tonight we're going to have just a different idea of Dr. Anton Mesmer. Yes. So the first thing I'd like to do is get my thing here. Is define hypnosis, because we will be talking about it later, and I just looked it up in Merriam-Webster. And hypnosis is a trance-like state that resembles sleep, but is induced by a person whose suggestions are readily accepted by the subject. So would you agree with that? Yeah. And who's here been hypnotized before? Yeah. Question, did you ever feel out of control when you were hypnotized? No. So that's kind of an interesting thing. You did? Okay. Yeah, a little bit. It's an interesting thing. And it's not really totally the discussion of tonight, but yeah. Anyway, that's the definition that we're working with. Okay. So was Anton Mesmer the father of hypnosis? Well, in reality, he wasn't. I mean, he was what we know in the modern day, but reality, all of this goes back thousands and thousands of years ago, even in the Jewish faith, which I read, that all the ancient cultures had a form of hypnosis or trance-like states and healing through it, beginning with shamans and priests and stuff that would create ceremonies with chanting and drum beats and putting people into trance states and then inducing healing within their bodies. So it's not like something new that happened with Anton Mesmer or anybody today. It's been going on for thousands of years. And what interests me about that is the idea that all these people ever wanted to do was to help people feel better. It seems like it's a quest of us as a species, as a human species, is that we don't want people to be sick. And all these people, these healers that call themselves heroes, all they've been doing is trying to find ways to help us to feel better. And that really moves me. So they had these things called sleep temples. Tracked back 4,000 years to ancient Egypt. Sleep temples. Have you heard of those? Yeah. Sleep temples. Temples. Yeah. And how it worked was they would bring these people into these temples. They had like reclining beds for them. They called them clines, I believe. And they would put them into a trance through chanting. And then I'm giving you like a synopsized version of it. And then they would basically make suggestions to contact the gods and things like that. And then these people would go into these sleeps, these deep sleeps, and they would have dreams. And then when they would come out, the dreams would be interpreted by the person, help them to interpret their dream, and a healing would take place because it was all about them and whatever they were coming in with, some kind of ailment of some sort. And usually it was like psychosomatic ailment of some sort. And in order to do this, they were called seekers. In order to do this, they even had to go through like a ritual to begin with in order to be purified, to go into the temple to begin with, to be able to be healed by them. And the first guy, his picture was this guy over here. I guess he was in the movie The Mummy, they say. His name is, let me see if I can find it here, Imhotep. Amenhotep, thank you very much, because I went off my notes and now I can't find where I am. All right, yeah, Amenhotep. And he was considered like the first physician. And so that's basically the way they did it. And what they're saying is that these dream temples slowly evolved into what we call medicine in hospitals today. So it's not something new, and they've been doing it. We've been doing this for thousands and thousands of years, trying to find ways to make a person feel better. So it says a good dream would be one in which the god would cure the wound by touching it. Once the person woke from their sleep, the attendant would spend time with them, reviewing any visitations from the god, helping to explore the dream and secure the insights appropriate to that seeker at their stage of development. So, yeah. And apparently, here was a picture I found of a dream temple, one of them, that was a painting. And I think that's one of the Greek gods. Yeah. Interesting, right? Yeah.
How
No.
can we possibly know?
Well, there must be written records. I don't know. I just assumed because I read it that it was true. But I think there was written records and archaeological findings and stuff that declared this. I mean, we know for a fact that the Egyptians used to dissect the brains and things like that. Something wrong? No. Yeah. Oh, okay.
Go to speak.
Yeah. So
just repeat her question.
she
so
was
we can
saying,
hear.
how can you prove this? Because it's 4,000 years ago. Well, probably oral traditions, things were written down and passed on and things like that. But, I don't know the answer to that question. Besides, I read it and I figured it was historically accurate. Yes.
Well, plus they have it. These aren't just pictures.
Yeah, these are
not. I mean, they're obviously not photos.
ruins.
And they have proof that they mummified the heart.
Yeah.
Because they believed that was the brain, and so they still have everything.
And they were dissecting it and
is
things like
actually
that.
Written.
Yeah, it is. But like I said, I didn't go into it too deeply. But plus the ruins that were left and the pyramids and all of that stuff. I mean, it's all there for us. So yeah. So how did they figure out what the ceremony was? I'm assuming that it must have been written somewhere. Yes. Give her mic.
I just wanted to say one thing about Amenhotep.
Yes.
As an Egyptian god, pharaoh, whatever he was the first one that actually believed in only one God.
Oh, thank you for that. Thank you. So to go on, anyway, these healing temples, these were all over the place. They were in Rome. They were even in Britain. They found them, ruins of them, and so yeah. So they, funnily, humorously, not humorously really, but Ruth's the psychiatrist. So they said, well, this is the modern healing temple, which is the psychiatrist's couch and the chair. So I thought that was true. It is. I mean, the therapist's office today is a form of that. Yeah. So, okay. So what does this have to do with Anton Mesmer? I just wanted to give you a little history of, that he wasn't the beginning of all this, although we call him the father of hypnosis. Okay. So Anton actually was born Franciscus Antonius Mesmer. And he was born, and I couldn't find a lot of pictures, so I don't have it, but that was his hometown right there, that painting. But he was born on May 23rd in 1734 in a village called Eisenach in southern Germany. And as I said, he was christened Franciscus Antonius Mesmer. And he had 8 brothers and sisters, and one brother and the rest were sisters, and his only brother became a priest. And he was supposed to become a priest, too. And his father was an archbishop, and his mother was a locksmith's daughter. And one of the things they said, which I guess because he was so drastic in his teachings of the time, but that he was born 12 years previously, only 12 years previously, they were still burning people at the stake for the type of thing he would have probably been burnt at the stake too. Yeah, and he was labeled as a Satanist by some person named Ab Fiard, who I don't know who that is. I didn't look it up. But he had a beautiful childhood in this wonderful countryside. He loved nature and all of that. And he began his education, in a monastery. And like I said, he was intended that he would become a Catholic priest. And they sent him to Jesuit college. And then he studied. There he studied logic, metaphysics, theology, but he decided the priesthood was not for him. It was not for him. So he enrolled at the age of 25 in the University of Vienna as a law student. Did you know that about him? Oh, okay. Are you still awake? Yes. Anyway, he was a law student, but then he gave that up because he decided he wanted to be a doctor. And so at the age of 31, he passed his final exam, and here's a picture of the University of Vienna, where he went to school. I know, right? I'm sure it's still there today, right? And I think you see it in all the movies. Don't all those people that go to the University of Vienna, you always see it in all those old movies. Anyway, so he did get his degree in medicine, and he graduated with honors. Yeah. And then he submitted his doctoral thesis and his 27 propositions. I debated whether I would go through these 27 propositions, but they are so intense that you would not you would not want me to go through them, and we would be like here all night trying to decipher what he said. But if you want to look them up, they are available on the internet. But they all had to do with this idea of, it was called, okay, here's my Latin, Disputio, and I practice too, de planetarum influxu, concerning the influence of the planets. And to this title he added the words in corpus humanum, on the human body. So it was all about the influence of the planets on the human body, which I think part of that we still believe today, because I always hear, that Mercury is in retrograde and it's influencing us and stuff. So this is like nothing new. It's new. It's not new to us. So those 27 propositions were put into his dissertation, and yeah, that's that. So could he be regarded as the father of psychotherapy? I don't know. We're going to see if we think that by the time we're all done here, because we know that John Braid, I think it's John Braid, right, was the one. James Braid was the one that was considered the first hypnotherapist, I guess. But Anton was the beginning of it. So it's said that his work was influenced too by Isaac Newton, which I thought was interesting too. And Isaac Newton apparently had a scientific big writing called Principia, and how the ocean tides caused by the gravitational effects of the sun and moon how the ocean tides were influenced by the effects of the sun and moon. And he wrote, and now we might add something concerning a certain most subtle spirit which pervades and lies hid in all gross bodies, by the force and action of which spirit the particles of bodies mutually attract one another as near distances and cohere, and electric bodies operate to greater distances, and the members of animal bodies move at the command of the will, namely by the vibrations of the spirit, mutually propagated along the solid filaments of the nerves from the outward organs of sense to the brain, and from the brain into the muscles. And then what I know about this makes sense to me, because it's a lot of words, but he's basically talking about spirit, what we know as spirit, what Ernest Holmes would have called the unformed substance, or the ether, and everything that brings the human form together, or spirit behind the human form. So when Anton Mesmer spoke of this, he spoke of it as fluid. He didn't talk about it as spirit. He talked about it as fluid. And he also followed the work of somebody named Paracelsus, who believed that magnets and the heavenly bodies produced a fluid that interacted with human bodies. And that's where this animal magnetism came from, which we're going to discuss in a minute. All right. So, see, I told you it's very dense. And Yes?
To me, electricity is something that we know about, because
Right.
It has not been known for that long.
That was another word that was used for this thing, this energy he was talking about, was electricity. Yes. May have been referring to understand the phenomenon of electricity. Yes, I didn't read that part. Definitely. So this is his wife. He did get married, and she was a lot older than him. He graduated from school, and he got married, and her name was Maria Anna von Posch, and she was widowed, and she was 10 years older than him, and she was very, very rich. And they were married in 1768, and they moved into this Vienna mansion, you can only imagine, and it was bought for them by her father. And he equipped the house with all his, with like a medical practice room, so he could practice his medicine in his laboratories. And what was interesting to me too was that they were really into the music scene, and these people were all his personal friends, to the point that at 12 years old, Mozart Mesmer commissioned a new musical genius on the block, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, only 12 years old, to write an operetta, Bastien and Bastiene. The work was performed in Mesmer's private theater in his garden. And that's something I did not know about him, but I thought that was interesting. And he also knew these two other composers, Gluck and Haydn. So that was interesting. So his wife was in the upper, echelons of Vienna, and so they had all that going for them. Let's see. And he also was musical, which I thought was really cool. He played the cellist, he played the cello, he played the piano, he actually sang. He was getting advanced in the social scene of Vienna, but he also wanted to bring his doctoral, talents to the same place that he was with all this other stuff, with the music and everything. So, anyway, this is animal magnetism, which was his theory. A responsive influence exists between the heavenly bodies, the earth, and the animated bodies. That's just like in a nutshell, okay? And he was following this Jesuit astronomer. His name was Maximilian Heil, who was curing illnesses through magnet therapy. We still use magnets today, right? I know, right? And and I just read that Melinda Kramer, who was one of the founders of Divine Science, I was reading her healing, I think it was her that I was reading, her healing papers. And one point when she was looking for a cure, she said, I tried everything, I was even magnetized. And that was in the 1800s, so obviously they were still using it by then. Anyway, so harking back to his doctoral thesis, Mesmer believed he understood how Heil's magnet therapy worked. If the magnetic fluid truly existed, and it must exist, if magnet therapy worked, then Heil's magnet were most likely curing people by causing an artificial tide in the fluid. So in the fluid within the body, they were causing a tide. But aren't these the things we think today about the magnet therapy? Who's ever had magnet therapy? I have too. I actually wore a magnet thing for a while. That was back in the 90s. Yep, it was a big thing. I should have worn it tonight. I still have it. Anyway, Mesmer conducted trials with magnets, okay? He had a woman come to him, and he actually made her swallow the iron preparation, and then he fixed magnets around her body, but the woman said she could actually feel something. She could feel like her fluids moving and cleansing, and he believed that this confirmed his theory. So, was she healed? He says she was. One time when present, he was watching a person. Back then, they must have bled people. So he was watching somebody being bled, and he saw that if he would go closer to the person, the blood would increase and decrease as he moved away. So that was one of the things where he started to think that, oh, maybe I'm magnetic myself, right? I think I have another slide here for this. Oh, we can read this again. In essence, he proposed that an invisible magnetic fluid filled the universe. Mesmer's fluid linked everything, humans, the earth, and the heavenly bodies. If the fluid became, this is how people became sick. If the fluid became unevenly distributed, there would be ill health. Correcting imbalances in the fluid led to the recovery from the illness, and this was achieved by his methods. So, but we do that now too. We think in quantum physics, we're saying that, and stress makes our bodies, imbalanced, and it changes our energy field, and it changes how it makes us sick because we're not, I don't want to go into it all, but yes. Blood pressure. Yeah, definitely, all of it. So, yes.
So as fluids, just so I can get the right translation, the fluids, so I can see it in my mind too, is the energy. It's not fluids.
Well, I saw it as the energy. They never said blood once, but it could be, but they never used the word blood. They used the word fluid, meaning energy. That's the way I understood it. Mm-hmm. I'm sure it's affecting the blood because the blood is the life force of our bodies, right? So, yes.
We couldn't say that it would be blood because it filled the universe. So blood doesn't fill the universe. It has to be something invisible, which we would today call spirit, but at the time they called it fluid or ether. Yeah, yeah, right.
Yeah, no, it wasn't about blood. It was definitely about what do you call it? Energy field. Okay, let's see. Oh, yeah, so then he published a book finally, but it was a book just called The Discovery of Animal Magnetism, which he described 27 principles, which were the 27 principles from his dissertation, but he actually put them into a form, explaining them to people. His point of view was if the patient was sick because their body lacked magnetic fluid or had blockages in their magnetic fluid circulation, blockages that Mesmer's treatment could improve. And this is the thing we know about him is that he dressed like a wizard, and he was very attractive, and people were mesmerized by him because he was very theatrical, just like Patrick and I. No, I mean, he was very theatrical. And we are, we're impressed with people that are very animated. And they said that's what he was. He looked more like a wizard. But they were making fun of him wearing long gowns like the one I have on, which I love, and waving a magnetized wand over people. Where's my wand? Yeah, and all of that sort of stuff. So, but he believed he was doing his work. And they were there was also he had a piercing stare. They said that he would look into people's eyes, which is remnant of hypnosis as it progressed. And then he would have so many people. He had 200 people a day in groups. Wow. We're going to talk about the baguette soon that he used. And there was so what would happen during these sessions apparently is these people would come in, and he would do his thing with the magnets and all of that, and and whatever he did to put them into a trance-like state, and then they would actually get hysterical and start convulsing sometimes and things like that. They called it the crisis room, and they would carry them away to this crisis room, and then they would come out and they'd go into a stupor, and then they'd come out and they'd be healed. I know, right? So you can imagine his reputation, especially with the women. Okay, right. So yeah, they said outbreaks of mass hysteria were frequent during these treatments. People who became particularly hysterical had convulsions in his presence. Usually women would be removed to crisis rooms. And then they called it mesmermania, and it was really going nuts there. Yeah, he was very famous. So what you can only imagine that his unorthodox methods were, of course, aroused active hostility from the medical world. Yeah. And one of the reasons, too, was because a lot of his cases came from people that the medical world couldn't cure. So they were coming to him looking for a cure, and I'm sure that would bring hostility from the medical world. And they called him a charlatan, and they wouldn't give him any credibility at all. And they even refused to examine his patients beforehand, and stuff like that. Or if they did, they said nothing was wrong with them. So this brings us to the case. Oh, there's one of the rooms with all the people. I'm going to talk about that instrument in a little bit. Not right now. It's called a baguette. But there was a famous case in Vienna. Are you familiar with this, anybody? The blind patient? Okay, so this woman was a prodigy of Mademoiselle Paradis was her name, and she was a prodigy of the Empress Maria Theresa. And she received a pension because she lost her vision due to some paralysis she had or something. And nobody could help her. Well, her dad enlisted Mesmer to help her, and she was a piano player and everything, and apparently her eyesight started to improve. And there were a lot of rumors that, sexual rumors and things like that, but nothing that could be substantiated. But her eyesight did start to improve. But the doctors were all saying that's impossible. She's just imagining she can see. But her father was really excited about it and everything. However, what ended up happening is the medical profession, or whoever they didn't give a name. What happened was they convinced the dad to take her away from Mesmer because they said if she bought her sight back, she'd lose her pension. Well, makes sense, right? You know, what are, you know, yeah. Yeah, it is that way too, right? Sometimes, I mean, I hate to say it. Anyway, but he went away in a scandal after that because they made all rumors up about him and the woman. I mean, I don't know if they were true or not. In fact, they don't ever say anything about his wife again after the beginning. I heard one thing that he left her, but you wanted to say something?
Yeah, because it kind of hit me, this idea that she wouldn't get her pension, because when we took the Jesus afternoon class with Dr. Peggy, she mentioned it when we did it kind of in joke, but about when Jesus would say, do you want to be healed? They had to say, do you want to be healed? In the same way with our modality, we don't go in and say, you're going to be healed. You have to ask for that. But there was a thing, too, that she was saying jokingly, but to the blind man, are you aware that once you regain your sight, you can't hold a basket down here any longer? And so, I mean, there is that truth in us, even working with people that have been sick for a while, that they said, wow, you know, the one thing I don't remember is this is so current for me about being ill that I forgot what being well is. So I have to almost reintroduce myself to what it's going to be like to live now, not blind, not maimed.
Well, they even said with her that she was having a hard time because she couldn't play the piano as well because she was starting to see the keys, and then her hands would look down at the keys, which you don't usually do, I guess, when you're playing the piano. I don't know enough about it, and so they were saying it was actually impairing her by getting her sight back. Interesting, right? It does make sense. It makes a lot of sense. Yes.
I have a question. So when he was working with all these people, with these groups of people, or like this, was he hypnotizing them, or
well,
giving
supposedly
them
he
things
did.
to drink, or what was he?
He wasn't giving them anything to drink, but he did stare into their eyes. He didn't call it hypnotism, but he stared into their eyes. He would touch them. He would, touch their forehead or something in certain places. Use a wand. He didn't call it hypnotism. But yes,
So he would
I would
just
say
talk
he
to
was.
them and
Yeah, he would talk to them, and
motion.
supposedly he was so mesmerizing. I mean, that he had a big presence, and so people, and a piercing glance, they said. But I don't think that he didn't call it hypnotism. They didn't even have that word then. They didn't have it.
That was a good question about the actual, like, did you give him anything to drink?
No,
Was
they
there a
didn't.
sedative? You know what I mean?
Other
Yeah.
than the metal, the magnet
Yeah.
filings or whatever they were, which that kind of is weird. A lot of this information, even though I read these 3 books and I read everything I could find on the internet, there's so many different renditions of him that you wonder sometimes which ones are the true ones. Besides the history that's really been written, which everybody writes according to their own opinion, right? So anyway, so after the big Vienna fiasco with the blind patient, he went back to Paris and did his work there. Now, this is the thing, one of the things he used. This is really interesting. It was called, have you ever seen this? It's fascinating. It's called a baguette, okay? He did this, I believe, because he had so many patients that he couldn't treat them all at the same time, all right? So it was an oval vessel, 4 feet in diameter and 1 foot deep. There were different versions of it. He would put it in the middle of the salon, and in it, there were wine bottles filled with magnetized water with their necks outward. Water was then poured into the vessel until the bottles were covered. Filings of iron were thrown in. The vessel was then closed and pierced through with many holes. That's what we're seeing. We're seeing it clear, closed. And it was pierced through with all these holes. And then from each hole issued a long movable iron which the patients applied to the parts of their body that were afflicted. And then he also, it got to be too much with him, so he had to train other magnetizers to work with them, so he did. And it does say he passed and laid their hands on the patients. If they were holding onto the magnet, then I guess it increased the energy. It was increasing the magnetism. And they used music, singing to enhance the atmosphere. They used their finger wand, here we go, which slowly they put before their faces and behind their heads and on their diseased parts. I mean, eye contact and hand pressure were also used, to answer your question more. All right? Yeah. I don't know. I know, it doesn't say that. I don't know. So eventually he built baguettes that were really big that, people, so he could do so many people at the same time. But see how much people want to be healed. They'll try anything, right? I mean, right? We'll all try anything when we're sick, right? And there's nothing wrong with it. Yeah, because if you could do the, if you could touch him or touch the other magnetizers, then you get more power because he was magnetized too. It's fascinating, right? Sue's got big eyes.
How come we didn't
trying to stay
get
awake.
this taught to us? I don't know if the other practitioners and ministers in the room, but I don't remember this. This is more fascinating than what I remember.
Because we didn't go into it that deeply.
Yeah.
We were like skirting over stuff, going, yes, Anton Mesmer, yes,
This
Phineas
is
Quimby,
very,
yes,
very
blah, 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 blah.
fascinating.
So this is like when, it's like when you go to college and you take a class and you only can touch upon stuff and you're going, I wish I could stop there and learn a little bit more about that, but you don't have time because you're trying to fit it all in. Anyway, so there's the baguette, and he trained other Mesmer. I said that. Okay. Apparently, this was the thing. Some people didn't have any effect at all, and then some others were like spitting and sweating and convulsing, and then they would get tired, and then they would, come back again, and they would be well or they wouldn't be well. But they say that they came out cured. So he started to believe that he could make this transfer